Hi, this is Pat Johnson, your psychology instructor, and in this mini lecture, we're going to introduce the topic of social psychology. We start studying social psychology towards the beginning of the course, even though it's not logically there in your textbook. And I chose to put social psychology early on in the course because it illustrates some of the research methods that we studied in the first chapter. Also, when we talked about research ethics, this chapter shows some really interesting studies in social psychology that were done before the research rules were put in place. So you will see just what the field of social psychology is. From your textbook, our author tells us that social psychologists use scientific methods, in other words, research methods, to study how we think about, influence, and relate to one another. In other words, social psychologists don't just study the individual, they study how other people, groups, and social situations affect us as individuals. Probably the main premise behind social psychology is that behavior is a function of both the person and the social situation. In other words, situations are powerful. The picture you see on the screen is a photo from the Stanley Milgram study on obedience to authority. You can see a video on Milgram's study and read about Milgram's study in your textbook. When you read about and view Milgram's study, you will see how people are greatly influenced by the social situation, so much so that they would even do something that most of us would be unthinkable, and that is to possibly put someone to death at the word of an authority figure. So again, as you go through this chapter, as you read about the topics and watch videos on the topics, just remember that the main premise behind social psychology is that social situations do indeed affect our behavior, often more than we believe.